You know how everyone loves saying, release the Epstein files? It's one of those rare issues that unites the left and the right, and everyone wants answers, and every new detail is more shocking than the last. We've been following it closely for that reason. But here's something that's just as disturbing. While Epstein's case made global headlines, a former college athlete just got an even lighter sentence for abusing a child for 7 years, starting when she was 7 years old, and almost no one is talking about it. His name is Candon Dean Dahle, former BYU baseball player. Last month, he got sentenced to 180 days in a local jail. No prison, no sex offender registry. While we're still making documentaries about Epstein's crimes, this was happening in an Idaho courtroom, and we barely even saw it. It barely made the news. We obsess over Epstein because his case was spectacular. The private island, the powerful connections, the global scale. But here's the truth. Every town has its own Epstein. Men who abuse children and walk away with barely a slap on the wrist because the system was designed to protect them. Dahl is Idaho's Epstein, and the machinery that let Epstein operate for decades is the same machinery that just gave Dahl 180 days for 5 years of child sexual abuse. Before I tell you that story, you need to understand the system that made it possible, because what happened to that 7-year-old girl connects directly to Donald Trump being found liable for sexual abuse and still becoming president. It's also connected to Matt Gaetz facing a federal sex trafficking investigation involving a minor and getting nominated to Attorney General. It connects to Brett Kavanaugh and Clarence Thompson sitting on the Supreme Court despite credible allegations of very serious misconduct. Before we get into it, I want to give a quick content warning. What I'm about to cover today includes mentions of child sexual abuse, trafficking, and pedophilia, and systemic failures. So let's talk about the man who just returned to the White House 300 and something days ago. Trump has faced over 25 sexual misconduct allegations spanning 4 decades. These are detailed, consistent accounts from women across different contexts and different time periods. In 2023, a jury found Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation in E. Jean Carroll's case, awarding her $5 million. When Trump continued to defame her, another jury awarded her $83.3 million. A civil court determined he sexually abused a woman in a department store dressing room in the 1990s. But that's just one case. Summer Zervos, a former apprentice contestant, accused him of sexual assault in 2007. Jessica Lead said Trump groped her on a plane in the 1980s. Jill Harth filed a lawsuit in 1997 alleging he groped her. Natasha Stonoff, a People magazine writer, said he forcibly kissed her in 2005 while she was covering him and Melania. There's the infamous Access Hollywood tape where Trump bragged about grabbing women by the pussy because when you're a star, they just let you do it. And Trump was close friends with Jeffrey Epstein for years. There's photographs, party records, flight logs, the birthday card. Epstein once said of Trump, he's a lot of fun to be with. It's even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and as many of them are on the younger side. Court documents from a 2016 lawsuit alleged Trump raped a 13-year-old girl at an Epstein party in 1994. 13. The case was dropped after the plaintiff received death threats, but the allegations remain well documented. Trump has never faced criminal charges for any of these allegations. He became president not once, but twice. Look at who he surrounds himself with. RFK Jr. settled a nearly $1 million sexual misconduct case with his former babysitter, who alleged he groped her in the late 1990s when she was 23 and working in his home. She described him cornering her in a kitchen pantry, blocking her path, and touching her inappropriately. She kept a diary entry from the time of the incident detailing it. Kennedy's response? He called it a reported issue, and he said he's not a church boy. He didn't deny it. It happened. He essentially shrugged it off. He faced no legal consequences and continued to tumble upward. He continued his presidential campaign and was recently nominated for a cabinet position in the Department of Health. Andrew Cuomo, sex pest himself, spent years positioning himself as a feminist ally, signing laws to protect women, condemning harassment publicly. Behind the scenes, he was allegedly creating a hostile work environment for many young women on his staff. multiple women, including executive assistant Brittany, accused Cuomo of unwanted touching, kissing, and inappropriate comments. An investigation by New York Attorney General Letitia James found he sexually harassed at least 11 women and created a toxic workplace culture. Cuomo resigned and moved out of the governor's mansion in 2021, but he faced no criminal charges, and he's now attempting a political comeback, framing himself as a victim of cancel culture for his own actions. He wasn't canceled. The women he allegedly harassed remain largely out of the spotlight while Cuomo rehabilitates his image on podcasts and cable news. Matt Gaetz faced a federal sex trafficking investigation involving a 17-year-old child. Despite the investigations, Trump nominated him for attorney general. Here's what we're actually dealing with. Men accused of sexual assault walk free more than 98% of the time. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, only about 310 are reported to police. Of those, only 50 maybe lead to an arrest, and only 28 result in a felony conviction, and only 25 perpetrators are incarcerated. That means 975 out of 1,000 perpetrators walk free. The system is functioning exactly as it was designed. When powerful men face allegations, institutions circle the wagon. The Senate confirmed Kavanaugh despite Chrissy Bailey Ford's testimony. Voters elected Trump twice despite everything. We built this entire cultural machinery that makes us far more worried about false accusations than actual sexual violence. Even through data which shows us false accusations are so rare, while assault is an epidemic. The same dynamics protecting Trump and Epstein operate in every local courthouse. The same presumption of credibility for the accused. The same resource advantages teams of lawyers, dragging the cases out until victims are exhausted. Same institutional protections, the same ideological cover about ruining lives with accountability. You don't need to be a billionaire like Epstein to benefit. You don't need to have a private island or connections to presidents. You just need to have enough advantages relative to your victim. Social capital, the right demographics, resources for a decent lawyer. The system bends towards you. But privilege alone doesn't produce light sentences. There's machinery that converts advantages into minimal consequences. Over 90% of criminal cases never see trial. They're resolved through plea deals, negotiated in offices, sometimes in minutes. Plea deals aren't about justice. They're about processing volume through a drowning system. Prosecutors carry hundreds of cases each year. Limited time, limited resources, immense pressure for conviction rates. Trials are expensive. They are time-consuming and risky. So the system runs on deals, plea deals, plead guilty to reduce charges, get lighter sentences. Prosecutors get guaranteed convictions. The docket keeps moving. Efficiency matters more than justice. Sexual abuse cases get devastated by this. It's hard to prosecute, often no physical evidence. Juries are skeptical of child witnesses, especially when defendants look sympathetic. So prosecutors offer deals that erase the sexual nature of the crime. Sexual assaults become simple assault. Felony lewd contact with a child becomes injury to a child. On paper, the sexual violence disappears. Why? Because it guarantees a conviction. It avoids putting traumatized children through brutal cross-examination, and it resolves cases quickly. Practical problem solving from their perspective. But look at the effect. Predators learn the system can be worked. Victims learn that their trauma matters less than the prosecutable convenience. And predators avoid sex offender registries, even though that registry specifically exists because sexual violence requires monitoring. Epstein worked the system for decades before it finally caught up to him. And even then, his first conviction in 2008 got him a sweetheart deal, 13 months in a county jail with work release privileges. The same prosecutor who gave him that deal, Alexander Acosta, later became Trump's Secretary of Labor. The system protecting the system. Public defenders are drowning in caseloads and can't negotiate effectively. Poor defendants get stuck in jail. Pretrial takes first offers, but defendants with resources get private attorneys who work the system strategically. Your privilege gets amplified. Social capital translates directly into better outcomes. Meanwhile, the system shows no such mercy to others. According to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, Black men receive sentences that are, on average, 19.1% longer than white men for the same crimes. Black men are 21.2% less likely than white men to receive a sentence below the guideline range. When mandatory minimums apply, Black defendants are 25% less likely to receive relief. For drug offenses specifically, Black Americans are incarcerated at a rate 5 times higher than white Americans, despite similar usage rates. A Black person convicted of a drug offense spends about the same time in prison as a white person convicted of a violent offense. The Sentencing Project reports that Black men serve sentences nearly 20% longer than white men for the same crimes. If Black men were incarcerated at the same rate as white men, U.S. prison populations would decline by nearly 40%. Mandatory minimums for drug offenses tie judges' hands. Sexual abuse cases, tremendous flexibility. When prosecutors see defendants who remind them of themselves or of their sons, that flexibility deploys in their favor. Two-tiered systems. Advantages minimize consequences. No advantages, you get you crushed. When Brock Turner, a white Stanford swimmer, was convicted of sexually assaulting an unconscious woman behind a dumpster, the judge gave him 6 months in prison. Or gave him 6 months because a prison sentence would have severe impact on him. Poor guy. Turner served 3 months. When Brian Banks, a Black high school football player, was falsely accused of rape, he spent 5 years in prison and 5 more on parole because his accuser recanted. His football career was destroyed. No severe impact considerations for him. Even when this produces outrageous outcomes, the system maintains the appearance of justice. Convictions obtained, sentences imposed, case closed. Let me show you exactly what this looks like with Idaho's own Epstein. Candon Dean Dahle sexually abused a girl for 5 years when she was 7 years old. 2nd grade through 6th grade, her entire early childhood, he abused her from age 7 to 12. Like Epstein, he had a pattern of abuse. Like Epstein, he targeted a vulnerable victim. Like Epstein, he thought he could get away with it. And like Epstein's first sweetheart deal, the system bent over backwards to minimize his consequences. Predictably, media coverage led with how he was an athlete, smiling photos of a former BYU baseball player as if his accomplishments matter more than what he did to a child. The same way media coverage of Epstein often focuses on his wealth and his connections for his heinous crimes. Here's what the system protected. System's protection mechanisms kicked in. Dahle is only being charged for what he did after he turned 18, even though he abused his victim for 5 straight years, from the time she was 7 until she was 12. The charges only cover the abuse that occurred after his 18th birthday. Years of abuse simply erased from his legal record. He was initially charged with felony lewd conduct with a child in 2 separate counties. Multiple jurisdictions mean a strong pattern, strong evidence. He faced decades in prison and a mandatory sex offender registration. In May 2025, he took a plea deal, pleaded guilty to 2 counts of felony injury to a child, 1 count in one county, charges in another county, dismissed. Prosecutors recommended probation because Idaho law doesn't classify injury to a child as a sex offense. No registry requirement. Prosecutors took 5 years of child sexual abuse and reduced it to charges that don't acknowledge the sexual nature of the crime. Made 1 set of charges disappear altogether. They structured the deal so he'd never register as a sex offender. In August 2025, in that sentencing, the same victim stood in that courtroom reading a statement describing how he destroyed her childhood, then watched the judge cut his sentence down to 180 days in local jail and 8 months of probation and some community service, 6 months. 1 day of jail for every 10 days he abused her. Epstein got 13 months for decades of abuse. Dahle got 6 months for 5 years. The math of injustice does not have any justice. Local jail, not prison. With good behavior credit, possibly out in 4 months. Then probation, where he checks in monthly, but otherwise lives completely freely. No sex offender registry. Once probation ends, no public record. No community notifications, no restrictions near schools. He could teach children. He could coach children. He could babysit. He'll pass background checks. Parents could hire him with no way of knowing. Just like Epstein after his 2008 deal, he was allowed to continue his life, traveling freely, maintaining his connections until victims and journalists refused to let the story die. A horrific injustice. Child sexual abuse during developmental years rewires brain development. Complex PTSD from sustained abuse, while her brain was forming basic templates for safety, trust, boundaries, self-worth, result in chronic hypervigilance where your nervous system never fully relaxes. She's going to have difficulty regulating her emotions, relationship struggles, because your template for intimacy formed through violation and dissociation, profound shame. ACE studies show that childhood trauma changes physiology, immune function, inflammatory responses, cardiovascular health. High ACE scores, early adverse childhood experiences, correlates with heart disease, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune disorders, earlier death. Sustained developmental stress affects the prefrontal cortex. She might struggle with planning, organization, employment because her brain development was disrupted. Depression, anxiety, possible substance abuse, relationship difficulties, chronic pain, autoimmune issues. Dahle altered her entire life trajectory, health outcomes, relationship capacity, economic opportunities, basic ability to feel safe. The system decided that deserves 180 days in a local jail. No registry, no prison, the same system that gave us Trump in the White House, despite being found liable for sexual abuse. The same system that put Kavanaugh in the Supreme Court. The same system that nominated Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. The same system that gave Epstein his first sweetheart deal. One architect at every level, protecting men with status, disregarding victims, prioritizing perpetrator futures over victims' justice. Dahle wasn't a billionaire like Epstein, but he had enough. He was a college athlete. He was a BYU student, clean record, right demographics, right resources for a lawyer. The system activated its protection mechanisms just like it does for Trump, just like it did for Epstein. And here's what has to change. We got to close the loopholes on Idaho's law allowing sexual abuse charges pleaded down without registry requirements. That is indefensible. Every state needs an audit for similar gaps. Restructure prosecutor incentives. Stop rewarding conviction rates. Reward proportional justice and victim satisfaction. Mandate victim participation in plea deals. No plea without victim approval. Victims need power to reject inadequate deals and close trials. Connect these dots. Connect them publicly. Dahle, Trump, Kavanaugh, Gaetz, Epstein, RFK Jr., every powerful man facing minimal consequences. All the same architects. Name the pattern. Dismantle the systems. Stay angry. Sustained organizing city council meetings, DA elections, victim advocacy organizations, refusing to let these types of cases disappear. That's what finally brought Epstein down. Victims and journalists who refuse to let the story die. Dahle will serve 6 months, maybe, then go on to complete probation and some community service, and he'll never appear on a registry, and he'll move on with his life. His victim will carry what he did in her nervous system, in her relationships, in her health forever. Unless we force change, the next case ends identically. We obsess over Epstein because his case was spectacular. The island, the jet, the famous connections. But cases like Dahle's happen every day in courtrooms nationwide. Every town has its own Epstein. Men abusing children and walking away because the system protects them. The real scandal isn't one billionaire flying away on a private jet. The entire system is designed to let men with power, status, or the right demographics get away with it every single day. From the White House to your local courthouse. That victim deserves better than 180 days. She deserves a system that protects children instead of protecting the futures of men who harm them. Power doesn't surrender voluntarily. It takes sustained pressure from people refusing to accept this as normal. 180 days for 5 years, starting when she was 7. Idaho's own Epstein. The system working as designed. Now we got to freaking redesign it by refusing to look away, by connecting individual injustices to larger architecture. demanding systems serve victims, because if we only care when it's a billionaire with an island, we're missing thousands of local Epsteins operating in plain sight every day, protected by the same system, destroying children's lives with barely a consequence. And if you've enjoyed this video or it's expanded your perspective, please share it. Please follow me. I am Lauren P. across all social channels, and finding some injustices of my own with my YouTube channel. So follow me here and release the Epstein files, but also justice for the victims first and foremost, and believe women, and pay women, and promote women, and listen to women.